This is Porch Lore, and I'm your host, Devin. This is the tale of the man in the red coat. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me last winter. Something I haven't told anyone because, well, it sounds insane, but I need to get it out, and I need you to believe me. And even if you don't, just let me tell it. Let me get this off my chest. It was December, and I was staying at my aunt's old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. You know the kind of place. Creaky wooden floors, drafty windows, and a silence so thick it feels like it's pressing down on you. My aunt had passed away earlier that year, and I'd volunteered to clean out the house before it was sold. I thought it would be peaceful, a chance to get away from the city and clear my head. But I was wrong. The first few days were fine. The house was cold, but the fireplace worked, and I spent my days sorting through old photo albums and boxes of knickknacks. At night, I'd sit by the fire with a book, listening to the wind howl outside. It was lonely, but not scary. Not yet. Then, on the fourth night, something changed. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard it. A knock at the front door. 3 sharp raps, like someone was impatient. My heart skipped a beat. The house was miles from the nearest town, and it was past 10 p.m. Who the hell would be out there? I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Standing on the porch was a man in a long red coat. His face was pale, almost ghostly, and his eyes, I can't explain it, but his eyes were wrong. Too dark, too still, like they didn't belong in his face. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made my stomach twist. I didn't open the door. I stood there, frozen, until he knocked again. This time, it was louder, more insistent. I shouted for him to go away, my voice trembling. The knocking stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard his voice, low and smooth, like oil sliding over glass. He said he just needed a little help and that he was cold and asked if I would let him in. I didn't answer. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but there was no signal. Of course. The landline wasn't working either. It must have been disconnected. So I was completely cut off. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the living room, clutching a fireplace poker, staring at the door. He didn't knock again, but I swear I could feel him out there, waiting. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream, or maybe a prank. But when I opened the door, there were footprints in the snow, leading up to the porch, but not away. I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was nothing. But that night, he came back. This time, I was in the living room, reading by the fire, when I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps, just like before. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the fire poker and crept to the door. Through the peephole, I saw him again. The same pale face, the same dark eyes, and the same red coat. He said he was cold and that he just needed a little help. His voice was soft and pleading, but there was something underneath it, something that made my skin crawl. I shouted at him to leave and go away, but he didn't move. He just stood there, smiling that awful grin. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire staring at the door, waiting for him to break in, but he didn't. He just stood there all night, knocking every hour on the hour like clockwork. By the 3rd night of this, I was starting to lose it. I hadn't slept in days, and the constant knocking was driving me nuts. I thought about leaving, but my car wouldn't start. The battery was dead. Great. I must have left on an interior light when I was unloading all the empty moving boxes from my back seat. And the snow was too deep to walk through. I was trapped. That night, he didn't knock. Instead, I heard his voice coming from inside the house. He said, "I'm here." I spun around, my heart racing. The living room was empty, but I could feel him, like a presence in the air. I grabbed the fire poker and searched the house room by room, but there was no one there. When I got back to the living room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the mantelpiece, where I'd left a photo of my aunt, there was now a single red rose. I don't know how he got in. I don't know how he left the rose, but I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I bundled up in my coat and boots and ran out the back door into the snow. The cold bit at my skin, but I didn't care. I had to get away. I didn't get far. The snow was up to my knees and the wind was howling, blinding me with icy flakes. I stumbled and fell, my hands sinking into the freezing snow. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps crunching behind me. I turned and there he was, the man, standing a few feet away, his red coat stark against the white snow. Then he tells me that I shouldn't have run. I scrambled to my feet and ran again, but he was faster. He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron, and pulled me close. His face was inches from mine, his dark eyes boring into me. He said he just needed a little help. I don't know how I got away. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe he let me go. All I know is that I broke free and ran, stumbling through the snow until I reached the road. A passing truck driver found me and took me to the nearest town. I never went back to my aunt's farmhouse. The police searched the property, but they didn't find anyone. No footprints, no red coat, no rose. But I know what I saw. So if you're ever alone in the middle of nowhere and you hear a knock at the door, don't answer it, because he might be waiting.